Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy healthy start to this nice, very cold, very frigid, actually, Sunday morning. Because it is Sunday, it is going to be a macro outlook on Bitcoin and by extension, all of the rest of the cryptos as well. And other than that, I'm wearing a nice little wizard robe, which makes me feel nice and warm and also of great importance, just like Saruman the Great. Anyways, let's jump right into it. I think today there is no reason to waste any time doing anything else other than looking at price action. So I wanted to start off here on the daily for the HPDR indicator. Now, the HPDR indicator gives us statistical probabilities that we can align with general ranges to give us an overall outlook as, essentially most likely. Anyways, that's a very rudimentary explanation as to what I'm going to be presenting right here, which is basically this. Anytime that we have tested one of the extremes in the blue zone, for that matter, the blue zone essentially encompassing this area right here and this area right here on the indicator itself, and testing the extreme of it would be, of course, this bottom end that you can see right here. Well, after that, there has always been at least a test to the median, which would be this area right here, kind of cutting it right in the middle, before having continuation or a reversal. So that is to say that before basically anything else happens, we do expect some sort of a test in this region right here, as this does update over time, of course. Now, to put this into context, the last time that we saw something of similar importance was back here, test the bottom side of it, then boom, pops back up, test the median, so on and so forth. You can see several examples actually just scrolling back for the past few months. Anyways, with that in mind, that does still give an overall upside bias, at least as far as what I'm looking at in the medium term here, for Bitcoin to test somewhere around 18,000 bucks first before anything else. Now, this does more or less align with the 4-hour time frame analysis that we were looking at on this particular indicator as well. That gave us that major bias for an upside move coming in from, I think it was like middle of last week. Yeah, I think that was like Wednesday, Thursday into Friday, which we did indeed get. So in this case, I do still look at this as very much relevant. And again, that would be somewhere tentatively around 18,000 bucks. That does, of course, update each and every day, but probably hangs somewhere reasonably close to that region. Anyways, as we do now move our way through it, I want to see what other corroborating things we can find on the daily. And with that said, we can pop on over here and first start off with something that I think is of great importance on the daily. We have extremely low levels on volatility, the BBWP indicator, back down to very low single-digit percentiles. Of which the last time that we are, within these regions, we did see some pretty impressive moves. This was the October pump from about 19,000 bucks to 21,500 bucks, and then the dump right on after that as well. So that, combined with the other offsetters that we're looking at, does give a bias that we're likely staring a decently sized move in the face, probably for the end of December here. So what else can we see? Well, first we can look at the daily jewel, which is about to get another upside signature right here after a bit of a corrective phase, which looks to have more or less played out. That'll be confirmed upon today with any sort of a closure here or higher on price action, thus giving another bias for upside continuation before anything else. On top of that, if we were to go reference stochastic momentum, the daily will also be crossing up again if Bitcoin does essentially close above 17,100. So that's kind of like the daily line in the sand for short-term / medium-term continuation here. And then if we were to go to a slightly higher time frame, we can start off with the weekly. Whoops, maybe not this weekly. How about, hey, nope, not that weekly, this weekly. Yes, that's what we're looking for. The weekly over here, we can see that Bitcoin did indeed confirm, or is about to confirm, regular bullish divergence. Now, it already happened on CME that we analyzed from Friday because Friday was weekly closure, but obviously spot price action is going to very likely fall through today as well. And seeing as we can kind of get an idea as to where spot will close based off of where CME closed, because they typically don't deviate all that much, well, you can essentially assume that Bitcoin probably hangs basically around here, maybe a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher around end of day. And if that does happen, then that confirms all of that, and we'll see those momentum oscillators continue to remain to the upside, again, as long as it's above those pivots. Anyways, now that we've gotten through that, I do want to take this another step further and go on over into the bi-weekly. So the bi-weekly and actually the monthly. No, I'll actually start off this one with the monthly. So we're going to be looking at the monthly jewel right here, and a couple things of interest as of right now. You can see that, and these green vertical bars actually not aligning with what we're looking at, of course, because I'm going to align that with a different time frame. But basically, anytime that we've seen the monthly get down to these regions and turn white, these have been macro reversals. Now, are these timed exactly on the actual low? I mean, in this case, it's pretty fucking close, I'd say, in terms of price. You can see this one turns white on this particular tick right here. The low was obviously over here, but in terms of actually switching around the momentum to the upside, gets it reasonably close, I would say. Moving on to the next one, and the only one basically after that as well. Again, doesn't necessarily happen exactly on the low, happens a little bit after the pivot off of the low, but still very, 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 very close to the actual low. So again, another sort of thing that says once we're within this region, you're a lot closer to a major, maybe even a macro low than not. And on the monthly look as of the current present times, you can see that, whoops, wrong one. Let's go over to the jewel. You can see that it is not turned white just yet. It is still actually dark blue. So it is potentially going to happen as soon as the end of this month of December. But as we've seen in the past, once this turns white, the low was already in essentially. So that would be reasonable, actually. That would be reasonable to say that, hey, that's something to definitely be watching for at the end of this month, because that would likely propel a much greater bounce probably even into the mid, maybe even deep $20,000 territory if that were to happen. Now, let's actually backtrack this by going to a bi-weekly time frame, so right here. And the reason why I'm looking at this time frame is because it's obviously going to give us more data based off of the jewel on these extremes, without having to go to a monthly, which is a little bit more on the limited side. Now, to be fair, we do get more data here, obviously with with the historical relevancy of this. But it's really only one more cycle. Now, that's the best that we can do, obviously, with the data that we have, because literally Bitcoin only has, so many prior cycles. But in this case, what I thought was interesting as I mark off these areas, and let me just get rid of this one right here because it's not relevant. What I have marked off is two things. One, the actual positioning of the biweekly jewel. So in these instances here, getting incredibly low along that green horizontal bar. And then two, when the jewel actually turns white, that white color. So that's where the actual vertical green bar comes in. And again, we can actually get the 2011 cycle within this case as well. And what do you know? When we look at it just plainly on chart, you can see again, this one's a little bit more closely timed towards the actual macro low. But again, the low was in. The low was in on a closing basis before this signal fired off. And what I think is interesting about this is that, similar to the monthly, the bi-weekly is in that same region for this current saga as well. So again, this is why I do still, I do still say on the higher term timeframes, look, Bitcoin might retest the lows, definitely possible. If it loses 17,000 or 16,900, I think it was from yesterday's video, then yeah, could very easily test somewhere reasonably close to our current lows. But ultimately, I do think Bitcoin's a lot more likely to be poised for a greater bounce to the upside before potentially coming back down again a little bit later. That's not really something that I have a strong opinion on just yet. Anyways, now that we've gone through that, so we've gone through that. Now let's go back on over here, and I want to speak about what I want to speak about. No, it's like I want to speak about the accumulation and distribution indicator, because once again we have another tick on the weekly here. So what essentially are we looking at? Well, we're looking at this indicator right here, the accumulation and distribution indicator, and basically what I've done is I've marked off all of the times that it has hit this green horizontal bar on the y-axis. So in this case, you can see that it's really only happened a handful of times in Bitcoin's history. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, working on time number 9 as of right now. Again, it's the best that we can do given the limited history that we have of this asset. But in this case, what we've seen, anytime the accumulation and distribution indicator has hit that level, well, we have seen an average bounce of about 49% over the course of 71 days on average. And if we were to take a first standard deviation measurement of the average gain, that would give us a range, or an areas of interest, I'd say, between 39.25% all the way up to almost 59%. And on the timing of that, that would give us a range in terms of days after signal given for about 50 days to up to 90 days, essentially. And if you actually go through the data here, there's really only 8 iterations, so it's really not hard to do. But you can see that, a lot of these are either basically 50 days or 100 days. so I did think that was rather interesting, because that would suggest that based off of the signal that we did see in early November, well, we're very likely looking at, again, end of December, early January, for a greater bounce, most likely. And thus far from that, from this current region, we have seen, a decent bounce, about a 15% bounce, around there basically. But that would still be very much on the outlier side of what we do expect, even on the bottom side of the first standard deviation. In fact, the lowest of these reads that we've seen based off this potential setup is actually the most recent one, coming in from the summer, where Bitcoin did bounce up 34.25%. Pretty fucking good one. But even that would be, considered, a little bit on the lower end. So looking at a 15% bounce, that is, definitely an outlier, I would say, as of right now. So if we were to play even to the bottom side of the first standard deviation, what sort of hopium sort of bounce could we be potentially looking at from these levels? Well, in this case, 39% puts you where? Basically low 20,000s, 21 to 21,500 or so. Again, that would be on the lower end. Personally speaking, I do think somewhere between 20 to 21,000 bucks is a lot more reasonable. But if we were to, again, reach a little bit deeper into that hopium drawer, let's see what the average gain would look like at, basically almost 50% bounce. That would put Bitcoin back around where 23,000 bucks or so, which still would be actually that would be a higher high, but ultimately it wouldn't really be breaking any of like the macro ranges just yet. That would still have to be back above 25,000 bucks. Above there, that's where things really do start to initiate what I think is going to validate Fiboswani's thesis there, where he's looking at a potential bounce towards 35 to 40,000 bucks, which is, seems a little bit far-fetched right now for myself. But if we were to see back above 25,000 bucks, yeah, I think that would be not just possible, but would err on the side of likely. So again, here's the thing, and here's where I want to bring things back down to reality. Look, if we do go to a monthly, if Bitcoin did rally, this is completely hypothetical. If Bitcoin did rally to 30,000 or even 35 or 40,000 for that matter, would that reverse the monthly trend? Well, no, no, it wouldn't. It'd still be another lower high, right? Bitcoin on the monthly is fucked as long as you're below basically like 45 to 50,000 bucks. Now, of course, what's probably going to happen, in best case scenario for the boo laws, is if Bitcoin were to bounce here and do something like that, you would put in a lower high, but then preferably come back down and set in a higher low and then try for the actual move. That would be a pretty strong reversal long term on the macro. But those sort of things take time, probably not happening anytime soon. And if it were to happen, I would think like 6 months to a year is probably what you're looking at, like minimum. Anyways, now that we've gotten through that, I do want to bring back a little bit of a highlight onto this chart posted by Charles Edwards. Now, this is from glassnode.com. I actually have a subscription myself, but I forgot my fucking password, so we're just gonna go onto Twitter and find it this way. But he's actually a really, really good follow. One of the few fundamental guys or on-chain guys that I think, knows what he's talking about. For the most part, couldn't give a fuck less about on-chain bullshit. But in this case, I do think that this one is one of the more compelling pieces of data here. Anyways, what are we looking at? We're looking at the long-term hold NUPL, so net unrealized profit and loss. Entity adjusted. So what essentially does it mean? Doesn't matter what it means. What it shows on the chart is that we are looking at extreme levels of deep capitulation here. So yes, as you have seen in the past, we've hit these levels. It can stay there for a while. It can certainly stay there for a while, but we're hitting these sort of same levels alongside the same levels that we looked at over here. On this chart for the jewel on the higher term timeframes. We're hitting it alongside what was the other one? Yes, this signal over here. And these sort of things, coming together does provide a nice combination between tentacles, quantitative analysis because, we're doing stats on this, and then also something from a more fundamental base as well. So again, when it comes down to it, I do think that the super bearish targets for Bitcoin, they might be relevant, but they'd be relevant much later, I do think. At least like Q2 of 2023 would be my best guess. But for right now, when we see all these things kind of aligning with each other, it's a lot more likely that we're going to see a greater balance coming in from these regions. Again, it can spend a lot of time going sideways here. That's completely fine, but more likely to try higher into the 20s than make new lows from this particular region in probably the next couple of months. Anyways, moving on to perhaps the last thing of the day, as this video is already a little bit on the longer side, but it's a macro Sunday after all. We can go over to this chart. This is the 5-day chart. The 5-day chart is actually closing tonight, and the reason why this one is really compelling here is because we're going to see basically, or very likely, the end of the current signal that was born in early November. Now, this signal definitely it did play out a little bit, but certainly not actual, at least in the way that I look at things. So it was a little bit what's disappointing. Yeah, a little bit disappointing in that regard. But at the end of the day, man, setups are setups. They're not just disappointing nor exciting. They just are as they are. Anyways, in this case, it was a volatility versus stochastic momentum signature. Low volatility plus direction of stochastic oscillator has essentially aligned with these sort of stats over the past 4 to 5 years. Anyways, the reason why I'm bringing it up right now is because that signal that was born in early November, well, that one's about to be done, or at least closed, assuming that Bitcoin does close anywhere above 16,450 today. So if that, basically what I'm trying to say is, if that happens, you're very likely going to see a mean reversion bounce at minimum from this as well, and also, a trendline regression and rejection based off of this trendline that's been governing Bitcoin's last few major lows on the 5-day chart, coming in from January of 2022, actually. So you got the January lows before a pretty big bounce. You got the June lows before another major bounce. You got the October lows before a less impressive bounce, let's say, and then potentially another major low right here as well. So does the bounce get weaker again? Possibly yes, but it can be a weaker bounce and Bitcoin can still trade towards $20,000. Or it could be a macro reversal. Because we do have several tests on that already, and the more tests, the more likely it is to break. So that's kind of what I'm looking for at the end of today to kind of once again govern a likely bias towards extension, towards $18,000, and you got 19.5, and then you got 20,500, something like that. It's kind of the order of operations and the way that I see them on the higher term timeframes. Other than that, we haven't spoken about anything on the lower term timeframes today. I don't think it's that relevant. Wanted to focus this video purely on the higher term timeframes, and and kind of explain yet again why I do think this continued line of analysis does point towards a major bounce, probably going into early 2023. Anyways, I think that's a good place to be leaving off on this particular video. I want to be wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.